Good afternoon, everyone. It's a moment of great pleasure to welcome each one of you at the 12th webinar of the Master Knowledge webinar series. My sincere thanks to CS Manish Gupta ji, President ICSI, and CS Dhananjay Shukla ji, Chairman CLG Committee, for providing this opportunity. As you all are aware that the Master Knowledge Webinar Series EEE was launched at the 24th National Conference of Practicing Company Secretary, which was held on 16 and 17 June 2023. It gives me immense pleasure to say that we have successfully conducted 11 of such webinars, and each one of us so significant topic of corporate laws. These webinars are being conducted with a motive to help our members, the governance professional, to provide them an avenue of knowledge growth and different perspective in dealing with the practical problem encountered on a day-to-day basis. These events bring together experts, professionals, and enthusiasts from the different corners of the corporate world to engage in a thoughtful or insightful discussion. Today we are here to attend our 12th webinar of the series that is on the topic of Green Bond Framework and Sustainable Borrowing. Green bonds are financial instruments issued to raise capital for environmentally beneficial projects supporting sustainability, climate change mitigation, and the transition of a low carbon economy. They fund sectors such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, waste management, and green building. Investing in green bond enable individual, institutions, and funds to contribute to environmental stewardship, combat climate change, and maintain financial security. To scale the necessary finance to achieve these national targets, new innovative financial instruments such as green bond need to scale up. Being a capital market regulator, SEBI has issued a concept paper in 2015 highlighting the framework or the guidelines for the issuance of green bond and their ultimate uses and reporting. Since the advent of framework of green debt securities in the Indian market, there have been multiple events in the sustainable finance space around the world, thereby necessitating a review in the context as well as in the same has been conducted by the SEBI on a continuous basis. However, there is a stark divergence between the amount raised by the listing green bonds in Indian jurisdictions versus the foreign jurisdictions or the autonomous jurisdictions like INX, that is Indian International Exchange, etc. As you might be aware, sustainable finance is the process of taking due account of environmental, social, and governance (ESG) considerations while making the investment decision in the financial sector, leading to increased long-term investment into sustainable economic activities and projects. Given the recent understanding and shift towards ESG and sustainable practices, it is imperative that each one of us has an understanding of these concepts. Also, going forward, as a professional take on the bigger roles in shifting focus on the companies towards these investment options and borrowing opportunities, it is imperative that we ourselves are fully informed and equipped. To quote statistics, Indian companies raised nearly around $7 billion through ESG and green bond in 2021 compared to $1.4 billion in 2020 and $4 billion in 2019. Given this scenario, an in-depth knowledge is solicited. So what better way can be to get insight from the regulators themselves? Today, we are privileged to have distinguished speakers to share their thoughts, opinions, and expertise with us. I'm truly honored to welcome our guest speaker today, Mr. Pramod Rao, Ms. Harini Balaji, and Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan and his team members. Coming to our honorable chief guest for the day, Mr. Pramod Rao, an executive director at Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, handling Department of Debt and Hybrid Securities, Inquiries and Adjudication Department, Quasi-Judicial Cell, and acting as a Quasi-Judicial Authority, and is a member of the IFSCA, the Inter-Regulatory Technical Group of Subcommittee of the Financial Stability and Development Council, and member of the Assessment Council of IOSCO. He also served as a member of the Board of Directors of various companies, as a member of the National Committee for Regulatory Affairs of CII, of Advisory Council, and Sahmati, and of SEBI Subcommittee for Regulatory Sandbox. Our next speaker, Ms. Harini Balaji, is a career regulator working in Securities and Exchange Board of India for the last 24 years, having insightful experience in the area of surveillance, fund management, corporate restructuring, governance, and secondary market. She recently took charge of the Department of Debt and Hybrid Securities, before which she was the head of surveillance department responsible for market surveillance of all the segment of the securities market. Our next speaker is a well-known personality for the ICSI, Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan, a company secretary, and he is the general manager in the Department of Debt and Hybrid Securities in the Securities Exchange Board of India (SEBI) since 2020. Having served companies like Madras Fertilizers and Kothari Petrochemicals, Chennai, he has joined SEBI in 2002 and has handled compliance and monitoring division dealing with the corporate governance, listing related issues, etc. Our heartfelt thanks to all the speakers for their contribution toward this initiative. Before we start the webinar, I would like to invite our beloved Vice President, Mr. B. Narasimhan. Sir, I request you to kindly address to our speaker. Thank you.
Praveen, respected Pramod Rao, Executive Director, SEBI. With Harini Balaji, CGM SEBI, I think Harini Balaji is a very familiar figure with our members because she was very much instrumental in getting the LODR in place, and the number of programs she had held across the country was tremendous, very well received by the members as well. Our own Pradeep Ramakrishnan, General Manager SEBI, and he's always been given a helping hand to us in whatever we need. And his two associates who are going to be the faculty for the day, both Nikhil and Priyanka. And of course, Praveen, my colleague in the council. Well, Praveen has already given a detailed introduction about the origin of green bond and the concept of green bond in India and the SEBI's involvement in getting it done. It started way back in the year December 2015, and now it is taking a critical shape. I need to also tell all the members attending this program that myself and President Manish Gupta had been to SEBI on, if I remember right, on the 8th of September when we had a formal meeting with Mr. Pramod Rao. And that time we were requested that can we have some program for our members on green bonds and the initiative taken by SEBI in this regard. Essence was our members are familiar with the concept of issue, and they are the one who would be handholding the promoters in getting it done. And the initiative also was very important because of the G20 meet, where a lot of issue has been raised on conservation of energy, environment, etc. If not for today, if we have to look at a better tomorrow, it is the need of the hour, and therefore we are working on it. Well, the government has already come out with a major issue which was done sometime in March 2023. Nearly $80 billion US dollars was raised in two tranches of 10 tenors each. That was the tenure of the bond, and this was received overwhelming response, and it was subscribed more than 4 times. SEBI also in February 2023 came out with a detailed guidelines for this is called the GDS. GDS stands for Green Debt Securities. Detailed guidelines was issued on 2nd February 2023. Apart from green bonds, we also have blue bonds, which is relating to comprise funds raised for sustainable water management, including clean water, water recycling, etc. And yellow bonds comprise of funds raised for solar energy, generation and upstream industries, etc. Also, this can also lead to, the SEBI also had concern that the funds raised through the green bonds should be used for the initiative for which it was raised, and the concept of what is known as greenwashing is defined as the greenwashing should not be done. Greenwashing is defined as the practice of channeling proceeds from green bonds towards projects or activities having negligible or negative environmental benefits. Well, this is the entire concept of it, and we have eminent personalities from SEBI to handle the topic for us, and I'm sure our members will be benefited by this. And in case you have any further clarification to be obtained, we can always get it done through Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan. But I want all our company secretaries and employment attending this program to work on this initiative of raising bonds from the public and get the management actively involved in it. Thank you, Praveen. I hand the mic back over to you to take it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Narasimhan sir, for the insight and the history of the green bond, yellow bond, and blue bond. Now, I would request Madam Harini Balaji, CGM SEBI, to kindly address to our company secretaries members. Thank you, Madam. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank ICSI for the opportunity given to us to address this important topic of sustainable finance. See, frequent environmental disasters and extreme weather events have led to this crying need for dealing with climate change and the need to finance the same sustainably. Because business can no longer be run or driven by purely by wealth maximization or the profit motives, without considering the environmental and social impacts of the activities of the firms. Haven't we all learned it the hard way, how the environment is teaching us of late? India is indeed committed to the global targets of climate change and has submitted its nationally determined contributions, they call it NDCs, to the UN under the Paris Agreements. At the Paris COP26 meeting, India updated its earlier submitted NDCs by introducing 5 nectar elements, Panchamrit it's called, of the India's climate actionables that they thought that they should be doing. Some of them, other than the overall target of achieving the target of net zero emissions by 2070, which can be said, some of the 5 nectar elements are to reach 500 gigawatts of non-fuel fossil energy capacity by 2030, 50% of our country's energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030, and reduction of total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now to 2030. These targets will not be achievable unless a sustained approach is followed. So, sustainable finance is thus the need of the hour to guide the country towards the Amrit Kal. To support India's version of green growth, SEBI has brought in the framework of green debt securities in 2017 for the issuers who are wanting to raise green debt securities. Recently, we also updated this framework of green debt securities with a view to align the extent framework of green debt securities with the updated green bond principles of the International Capital Market Association. So what have we done in that? We have updated it by enhancing the scope of definition of green debt security by including other modes like Mr. Narasimhan had pointed out, sustainable finance in relation to pollution, prevention and control, eco-efficient products, etc. And also we introduced the concept, he has also elucidated that introduced the concept of blue bonds, yellow bonds and transition bonds, which is relating to water management and marine sector, yellow bonds relating to solar energy, and transition bonds also are a framework of transition bonds. We have enabled to raise funds and move to a more sustainable form of operations and contributing thus to the India's goal on climate change. Also, we have prescribed certain disclosure requirements for issuers and certain do's and don'ts that would also address the concerns of greenwashing. So we just hope that these measures will help India's sustainable finance needs and also help the country to go get closer to the net zero commitments that we have already committed in the globally. So here with us we have our ED who to give you all a perspective of a deeper perspective of where we are and where we are intending to go in our commitment and in our regulatory framework. We also have our committed team which will give you a detailed run through into the nitty-gritties of the regulatory frameworks. So I wouldn't want to take much of the time, so I will leave it to our ED and Mr. Pramod Rao and the team to take you forward in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thanks for the status. May I request now Executive Director SEBI, Shri Pramod Rao ji, to kindly please address and guide to our members, please.
Thank you. Thank you once more. And like Harini said, that it is great that the Institute has come forward to help us both talk about green bonds and the framework. If it is okay, I will share my screen and walk you through a brief presentation that I have made.
Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So very quickly, what I would, sort of elaborate on what Harini also sort of put across and which I echo. We have but one planet. And to us, if we have to preserve this life on this planet as we know it and avoid the climate change that is upon us, I think greening India, greening the world is absolutely necessary. And what it entails is a host of activities that all of us as economic actors have to play. And to my mind, finance that is required for this, I think there are enough and more investment pools that are available, investors who are available. And therefore, it becomes incumbent to have some sort of, alignment, if I was to call it that, to reach these objectives. With that said, let me move forward. The sustainable finance itself has got multiple pillars. Some have come up earlier, some have come up in different forms and shapes. I have a brief outline to offer as to how I saw that progress over the decades gone by. But really, we term them as ESG. We have both sustainable and responsible investing, and CSR, which all of you are very familiar with. Finance, which is required necessarily to support all of these, takes multiple forms. And to me, those forms really, as I said, drive us into reaching across different elements, whether it's the people, whether it's the planet. And finally, economic enterprises are driven by the profit motive, so one can't actually deny that either. And indeed, maybe that is what pays our salaries and workers their wages. All of it coming together is what hopefully can take the shape of really sustainable enterprise. Within the framework that I outlined, the responsible investing has sort of come through after we understood, I would say, what was upon us in terms of climate change itself, in terms of what could go wrong at multiple levels for the planet. And I think as that started getting understood, people started realizing that we can't carry on as it exists. And just as an example, if we had to say about India, industrializing and developing, let's say, if we took the trajectory that US did, almost every person there has at least 2 vehicles, 2 cars, which add hugely to carbon emissions. For a country with 1 billion plus people to imagine that our development trajectory could also lead us to that would only mean that we would strain this planet far, far more. And it is for that reason that finally we woke up, I would say, to the realities of what climate change portended and what it meant for developing economies such as ourselves as well. Within that sustainable finance framework, I think 3 or 4 concepts emerged. Green bonds is one of them. Social impact bonds or social bonds is another. Sustainability bonds and sustainability linked bonds is yet another concept. Each of them probably have threads that are tied to the first thing which I spoke about, which is ESG, which is, sort of, as I said, leading to how we view the entire ecosystem, the entire environment surrounding companies, us as citizens and consumers, and the broader government system. Moving forward, even as I mentioned these elements, what is equally visible and in a way thriving is the entire bond market worldwide, which has galvanized itself around these 4 or 5 types of instruments. Huge amount of green bonds, social bonds, sustainability linked bonds that have got issued over the years. And India is not too far behind. I think Mr. Narasimhan as well mentioned some of the statistics, as did Mr. Soni. And they indicate to us that money is available. It is really about what are the end use and what are the purposes for which we want to apply these monies. That really we need a framework for. And if I had to talk about by countries, you can see where India is. It is a minuscule level as compared to rest of the world. And yet, if I move even more forward, the statistics from India are really not so encouraging either. This is domestic issuance. A lot of our corporates have been doing overseas issuance of green bonds. So that is why this number may appear very different from the dollar-denominated debt that is outstanding. Yet, as I said, there is enough and more investor interest. Even if we issue domestically, there will be enough and more takers, both who come in as FPIs, but local institutions as well, who are keen on investing. And these include mutual funds, these include insurers, pension funds, and so on. Our own concept of green debt got introduced in 2017. We went forward, we stipulated what kind of disclosure requirements were there, what kind of responsibilities the issuers carried forward. A lot of it you will hear from my colleagues as well as to how we have evolved from there to what we have now reached. And indeed, prior to the regulatory revamp in February 23, what we did have are all these characteristics that could be adopted for a green bond issuance, which allowed us to sort of finance, I would say, the changing corporate in many ways. In our revamp, we issued a consultation paper, and if I'm not mistaken, it was open for almost 2 months. We received scores of inputs, scores of shaping of our thought process around green bond framework. And indeed, as my colleague Harini said, we even looked at the International Capital Markets Association definition and how they had sort of put together their recommendations. And with that, we emerged with our framework for green bonds, which has expanded the scope considerably. It is aligned it to India's own nationally determined commitments made in COP26, 27. So there is linkages to how the government of India has spoken to the world at large and how we have framed our guidelines as well. I think again there was a mention of blue bonds, yellow bonds, transition bonds that we have brought in. All of these are subcategories of green debt securities. So to us, the umbrella is green debt. And within that, if issuers want to go in for, only related to water management and so on, then blue bonds might be what they can label as such. Transition is a far more wider concept to us. Somebody who is using, let's say, a fuel input of coal and moving to solar or wind energy as a source of energy, of electricity. To us, that itself is transition. So in a way, it can encompass much, much more than the specifics of what constitutes green as well. And my colleagues will walk you through this far more in detail. But suffice it to say that we heard and we took into account all of the inputs we got, which makes the revised definition, I would say, climate ready, if you will. For us, whether it is 2030 and beyond, or whether it is 40, 50 years into the future, each of the things that we do today are what are going to help us achieve India's nationally determined commitments. And that is what I think our framework is aimed at. I think, again, Mr. Narasimhan was the one who made the reference to India's sovereign green bond issuance. Indeed, it took place earlier this year, calendar year. And what it signals again is India's commitment to green, and RBI itself is doing quite a lot around banks raising green deposits. So you can see various policymakers and governmental authorities sort of looking at it. SEBI lens is obviously on corporate India and how do we facilitate corporate India in sort of meeting these green objectives. And that is where all of these, revised definitions sort of are meant to assist. The key concern from a regulator is obviously greenwashing, which is that if people try to, mislead or otherwise make false claims about their green credentials. So indeed, in February this year, not only did we have do's and don'ts, but we also had a circular which is got legal force talking about how we expect greenwashing to be combated. And one of the measures we've said, while for the first couple of years it is comply or explain, and it will move to mandatory after that time, is having a third-party assessment of the green credential of somebody who will both look at end use at the start of the bond issue and during the the tenure of the bond, be able to go across and look at what is actually happening on the ground as well. And to us, that is exactly to both address investor concerns of greenwashing, of making sure that they are not unhappy, that they thought what they are investing is into green, and what has happened is something else altogether. As you are aware, equally, what SEBI has sort of pioneered and put across is an entire reporting framework of BRSR. I'm sure many of you work on it directly and contribute to it. And what we took it further is really creating a BRSR core as well, which came into effect for top 150 companies, and then it will gradually reach the top 1,000 and others. And all of it again links to that there are now assessed or assured data points that can be looked at by whether ESG rating providers, whether by these third-party certifiers, or indeed investors who are looking to ESG investing in green debt securities. So to us, that is the entire sort of opportunity as well as the potential that we have. You can look at these statistics. To me, I look at it as that there is a large pool of investors available for corporates that you work with or are working at. This is really what I think really can help them as well as they transition from an old industrial stack to a green enterprise. What is it that we see as challenges ahead? I think one is lack of awareness, and that's why I thank the Institute again. By giving us this opportunity, we are able to tell you what's the larger framework we have. I also want to give a commitment that we remain open to feedback. So if there are inputs, if there are things you feel we might have missed out in our green debt definition, we are quite happy to take them. Even though we did hold extensive consultation, it's when implementation starts is when you sort of get the feedback, and we remain open to that. So to us, like I said, you have a supportive regulatory environment, and what we think is that there is enough and more opportunity across of green projects that can be done, and indeed our renewable energy example is really visible to everybody. That from the time the center decided that we want to make green energy a pillar in the last 10 years, that's really taken great roots. Similarly, when it comes to investors, I mentioned that the key risk is really about greenwashing. And to us, what we are doing to boost investor confidence is having third-party verification. Many of the corporates, even before our regime, were actually engaging third-party verifiers or certifiers. So I'm not saying it's actually something dramatically different that they'll confront now. But I think what they need to be aware is that investors increasingly expect this. And I think our comply or explain regime for the next couple of years is sort of to allow that adjustment to happen of investor expectation and issuer, sort of gearing up to be able to meet that. Several other policy measures, as you can see, are getting adopted, being offered by the government and so on. So all of that continues to be playing out. India remains a country of vast opportunity, and I think that is where whether you see our current growth numbers in the GDP or how we are, probably double the growth of in the next country, so as to speak, comes from that opportunity, and we should not squander that opportunity. The other point which both my colleagues and I take pride in is that we are no longer followers in the worldwide system. I think we are increasingly leaders. And even the green bond framework that I described, I think there is no other country that has adopted it at a country level for their bond issuers. There are these international associations, including IFSB, as well as ICMA, which have come forward with some frameworks. But at a national level, I think that's something which India can again take pride in. From our government side, whether in G20 presidency, but also in our budget announcements, you would have seen scores of, focus on green growth. And like I said, there is both a commitment really from the government on this. There is a regulatory support you're getting. And I see no impediments which will hopefully come in your way as you take this forward. I will pause here, and I'm happy to take a couple of quick questions, though, as I said, my colleagues will be more getting into the details and talking about what we have. So over back to you, Praveen Soniji.
Thank you, Mr. Rao, for the wide knowledge given, including the international perspective given on the topic. Now, I would request the most helping hand to the ICSA in all general, Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan. Kindly request you to kindly start with your presentation and just enrich the knowledge of our company secretary members. Over to you, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Praveen. Good afternoon, everyone. But before we start, Mr. Rao had said that asked if we have any quick couple of questions, because we have a meeting, they will be going. But before that, in case there are any questions which can be posed, he'll be happy to answer.
Pradeep, we have one or two questions. If you wanted, those we can relate, and if you want, I can check it up.
Yes.
Help us to understand the advantage of green bond over the traditional borrowing to the issuer.
So very quickly, I think there are two sort of key benefits to the issuer. One is in terms of that, like I mentioned, there are vast pools of investor money available, which can be deployed. And if the end use is shown to be green, I think those investors will indeed step forward. So I think that's benefit number one. Benefit number two, which we expect emerging over a long-term period, is really how I should put it, a greenium, if you will, which means that you end up paying lesser for the bonds you issue for green, rather than more when you do a regular bond issue. It may still be a little way off for us to see greenium, but I would believe that the deep pools of capital that are available itself for green, and that's a need for the country, for the corporate itself, that should be the key driver in issuance of green bonds.
So one more question I want to take up with your approval. Who are the key players in India that provide second party on green bond framework? And are there any regulatory guidelines in place that mandate the release of audited utilization and impact report?
So like I mentioned, we do stipulate third-party assessment for sure, but this is currently on a comply or explain basis. There are several issuers who have engaged third parties to sort of do this for them. They are not currently within the regulated space as such. I think as the sector evolves, we will look at whether they should be brought within the regulatory perimeter or whether regulated entities should perform. But at this juncture, there is no such desire. I think we would like that whatever is the industry's comfort and the people who are best capable of providing this are doing. My colleagues may have few names to tell you what issuers have sort of disclosed. But yes, this is how I would sort of.
So one last question I want to take up with you relating to the cost of the acquisitions for the green bonds. The high cost of issuing green bond in India poses a challenge for the market. How did you consider this as a challenge?
See, to my mind, I think I don't think there is an additional cost. Like I said, for the first couple of years under this new framework, there is a comply or explain regime regarding third-party assessment. That could have been a cost of the third party doing such thing. But it is just the end use and deciding that, yes, it is to fund this particular thing which fits within what we have called a green debt definition. So I don't think it is actually too far removed from a regular bond issue. The expense, if at all, to my mind, like I said, if the investors are going to expect a certification or an assurance, willy-nilly that will come into play at some point in time, whether the regulator says this or not. So I would say that I don't think there is actually a challenge around pricing. If there are things within regulatory purview that people want to flag, we are happy to receive those feedback and figure out what we can.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the quick response. My humble thanks to you on behalf of ICSA. and you may please be there to the extent the time permits to you, as you have already communicated about your next scheduled meeting. So we are grateful to you for your presence, sir.
Thank you once again. I must log off, but as I said, I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope we will continue to partner with the Institute in several such working training programs and so on and workshops.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Most certainly, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hari.
Thank you, sir.
Over to you, Pradeep, now.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, I just share a screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining on a Wednesday afternoon. So I was just checking YouTube's there are almost 1,700 people who are watching this, and thanks a lot for sparing your time. And I really hope
Numbers is 3,000 or 3,500.
Oh, okay, fine. I think maybe I must be watching a different version of YouTube then. So thanks a lot, but and I'm happy for sparing your time. And thanks to ICISI, thanks to Praveen ji, thanks to Mr. Narasimhan for this program. In fact, I should thank ICISI a lot more because this program has been organized as a drop of a hat. So we spoke to them and we were worried about the reach that this has not happened, that has not happened as far as green bonds are concerned, and they were happy to oblige. And I hope by way of this program, we're able to communicate, we're able to explain the facets of the green bond framework of SEBI, and also try to bring in a lot more as possible. So before I start, my colleagues who are behind me, Priyanka and Nikhil, will be explaining the nitty-gritties of the green bond framework. But before that, I want to give a lowdown on what exactly is this? Why are we talking about green investing? And why is this, there is so much clamor around this whole concept. See, the concept of a joint stock company, it's around us for almost 400 odd years, right? And what has happened is that over a period, people have managed this. The concept of joint stock company has ensured that people put in money either by way of equity, in which case I'm going to share some portion of my control, or I'm going to take in money as debt, in which case I'm only going to ensure I only allow you to enter my company as a creditor to some extent. So while equity is out of discussion for this particular instrument, it's about how sustainable things are as far as the investment is concerned and how did this evolve. See, if you look at it, essentially any investor looks at return, right? If I'm going to put in 10 rupees in a particular stock or in a particular bond, I would like to know how much I can gain out of that money, and it's rightly so. I mean, no businessman is a philanthropist, as much as no investor is a philanthropist. But what has happened is that over a period of time, there are certain events that have happened, which have sort of led to evolution of responsible investing, as I call it. Now, if you see the couple of terms that are part of everyday jargon for us, that is climate change and global warming, were coined around 30 odd years ago, 40 years ago. And the concept of climate change became a lot more used. It started getting preference over global warming, subsequent to what the Vice President of US, Dick Cheney, he at one point in time, he decided that let us use climate change a lot more as compared to global warming. That is when the media in the US started using that more, and it started catching on around the world, which also is a pointer as to how much of our lives are controlled by the media. So now if you look at any newspaper, the concept of global warming is not prevalent as much as climate change. People talk about climate change. And the reason is if we actually use the word global warming, it sort of inflames passions around it. Like it looks like something is burning around it, which is a lot more, which contributes a lot more passion as compared to a sublime, larger benign term called, climate change. However, now around the 80s, people just found out that the planet was actually getting hotter. The Kyoto Protocol was signed in the year, 1979. That was when, for the first time, countries around the world came and said that yes, industrialization is actually happening and it is contributing to the heating up of the earth. And that is when the United Nations coined the concept of ESG and also the principles of responsible investment. And if you look at it, who will sort of pioneer responsible investment? It is someone who can forego some portion of the investment, right? Some portion of the return on the investment. Sorry, not the investment, some portion of the return on the investment. So, and why is that? See, the concept of greenium was explained by Mr. Rao in his lecture just earlier. But if you look at it, generally all these projects are for green purposes, which will be explained by the team a little later. So when they are contributing for a green purpose, that satisfaction, that altruistic nature of that investment helps me forego that additional 0.5 basis points, or maybe even 1% of interest, which I would otherwise get in case of a brown bond, right? So it actually makes me go home, sleep well, because I have sort of contributed not to the harming of the earth, but to the greening of the earth. So that is when the whole concept of responsible investing has gotten, and it is actually it's just increased by the time. And I'm going to give you a couple of slides on what is this whole global warming about. What do you say that how do you say that the earth is getting heated up? But there are two ways in which the earth gets heated. One is obviously the natural way. We have the sunlight out, and because of which there's a natural way in which the planet gets heated. The second one, which has actually contributed to this term of global warming or climate change, is what is the the item of concern, and that is the artificial way in which we are heating up the earth. As I speak, I'm sitting in an air-conditioned room. Okay, I drove home I drove to office in a car. It was air conditioned, and so it's essentially, if you look at the amount of heat that I as a single person emit, right, is so much. So compared to so many others, just imagine having a factory and whatnot. So all of these things have led to a lot of gases that which have contributed to something as we call as the greenhouse effect, right? So these things are nothing but your carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, etc. Now, if you look at all this, that it has actually contributed to the heating of the earth. And apart from that, we have used vehicles. We keep using vehicles. Vehicles only are growing by the day. The need for vehicles to come down, the IC vehicles to come down, is because 51% of the world's heat is contributed. The additional pollution is contributed by these vehicles, which is why the concept of electric vehicles has actually gained a lot of traction. Though, of course, the jury is still out on whether an electric vehicle is as good as we think it is. The fact is that mankind, over a period of time, will find a solution to it. The reason is not far to see. We have had lessons from the COVID debacle, which we initially, how did we combat COVID? We initially got medicines of our own. We first stayed away from each other. Then we found a vaccine. So similarly, I'm sure for this we'll be able to do. Already there are alternative technologies like the electric vehicle technology. We have something like your green hydrogen and whatnot. So many other different things are being discovered, invented by man, so as to ensure that we actually have a sustainable planet. As Pramod Rao sir also rightly said, we don't have a planet B, we only have a planet A. So we have to ensure that this planet is livable. As much as we send missions to the moon and sun and whatnot, we still know that it's not there. None of those planets is livable, right? So this is what we have. Now, against this, each country has made pledges, right? Now, how can we contribute to helping the earth from getting hotter a little later, or probably not getting as much hotter as we think it to be? So this is where each country comes and makes a pledge. As I told you, in 1979, the Kyoto Protocol happened when there was a first conscious attempt made by countries to say that, okay, let us contribute to a greener planet. But then over a period of time, all these things have only accentuated. And in 2015, the first time countries signed something called an accord called the Paris Accord, where we said that we'll ensure that the heat or heating up of the earth is kept down to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And as much as we have it, we have already crossed that pledge immediately. We are just in 2023, and it is already 2.2 degrees, where it's 0.7 degrees more than what we pledged that it will be. On top of it, we are fighting wars. As we speak, there are 2 wars that are running right in front of us. And those things actually contribute also to all these things. Of course, we have to concern ourselves to what is civilian in nature. And as far as what is civilian in nature is what we can do as far as curbing pollution is concerned. Now, as far as India is one of the very serious countries that are serious enough to do this, which is why if you look at it, even SEBI, while we are indeed talking about green bonds today, when we looked at ESG as the whole totalitarian concept, what we did was over the past 1 year, we have made amendments, we have made changes to a plethora of ESG related law. We started with BRSR, then BRSR 4, we had the green bond framework, we had greenwashing framework, and then we had the ESG investing related issues, and then we also brought things on ESG ratings. So if you look at it, it's more a holistic approach that SEBI has brought. In fact, the SEBI green bond framework was so successful. The consultation process was so successful that an independent entity has actually gauged that there are 72% of the comments that have been offered by the public have been assimilated by SEBI in the final green bond framework, which is also a testimony to the fact that we are not an ivory tower regulator. We are a regulator who actually listens to people, and we make laws through a participative consultative process, which is also evident in this whole green bond framework too. Now, as far as India is concerned, coming back to the topic, we have to reach net zero by 2070, and which is a very ambitious target, though it may look 4 decades away. The fact is that we have to plan in such a way whereby we actually are able to reach the target. And one of the reasons why we have made it 2070 is that in COP26, countries came together to sort of make a pledge to phase out fossil fuels. But countries like India and China said that no, it's difficult for us to phase out fossil fuels because we are developing nations, right? So when you are developing nations, we still have factories, we still have other things which will perhaps contribute to some sort of pollution there, but we'll ensure that we'll reduce the pollution in our own way. So which is why we have said that we won't phase out fossil fuels, but we'll sort of phase down fossil fuels. And we have got ambitious plans. We have said that 1/3 of vehicles should be electric vehicles, and we have to make that renewable energy sources should increase from 15 to 60%, which is again very ambitious. Now, while Nikhil and Priyanka will be talking to you about the transition bonds, which is where the nationally determined contributions are evident. Now, as I told you, we have made pledges, right? We made pledges to the United Nations. We made pledges before the world. One of the things that we have made pledges is that we will ensure that we have something called a nationally determined contributions. Earlier, these were known as INDCs, intended national determined contributions. Now there's no more intended. You need to ensure that there are contributions. So which is where we have a concept of NDCs. And if you look at this, is a very important slide because this is something that we have sort of promised to the United Nations, that we will ensure that fossil fuel based electricity will increase to 40%, which is again a very good number. And we have also said that we'll create a carbon sink. Okay, how do we create a carbon sink? We create a carbon sink by increasing the number of trees, right? So we'll enhance the forest cover. Now, if you look at it, recently Brazil had a very nice thing to report. They've said that they have a new government, which is different from the earlier government that was in favor of, not so much in favor of sort of afforestation of the Amazon. The new government has ensured that the deforestation of Amazon has come down by 59%, right? So as much as the Amazon is one of the lungs of the world, we all have little lungs in each of our own countries. So we have said that we will increase our forest cover to, so that it will absorb 2.5 to 3.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which is again a very ambitious thought. And I believe we will be able to do. Every other day we see so many other functions where trees are being planted, but we have to only ensure that those trees grow. And the stuff doesn't stop with the planting of the trees. So this is something as we call as NDCs. And we hope that we'll be able to do it. Now, whenever the concept of a pollution thing comes, again, there's a lot of whataboutery involved, right? So what is this whataboutery in this particular case? About how much am I smoking? How much are you smoking, right? How much am I polluting? How much are you polluting? Of course, unfortunately, it's not that the pollution from Bangladesh will stay only within Bangladesh. It will obviously come to India also, right? So as much as we saw about COVID in some part of China, some corner of China, there was some infection. And it actually led to the whole world getting flattened. So similarly, now everything though we may be divided by borders, we may be divided by countries. The fact is that what is going to impact one country is going to impact the entire world. And that is how pollution is. Pollution is also one of those aspects. Now, if you look at the world, obviously US, UK, the European Union, and Australia, etc., contribute almost, a bulk of this pollution. China, US, and European Union, in fact, contribute to 50% of the world's pollution. And as much as while India can take pride in being one of the lesser polluters, in fact, Africa and India contribute only 11% of the world's carbon dioxide. The problem is that if you look at this particular slide, it shows that India is number 3 as far as the top polluters are concerned, and which is why the concept of green bonds and sustainable finance is actually growing. See, over a period of time, if you can take my words, I think maybe 2-3 years down the line, you can only issue green bonds. It will come to such a, things will come to such a pass whereby you will have to embed sustainable finance as part of your borrowing procedure. So today, like for example, we have something like the large corporate framework, which says that in case of large companies, you need to have X percentage through the bond framework, right? Now, if you take me, and this is again a personal opinion, for a period of 3-4 years down the line, there will be some provision whereby you will have to compulsorily borrow only for sustainable projects, because there is no other way. You need to ensure that these things are being followed, right? A couple of other things as far as emissions are concerned, there are disclosures which have to be made of Scope 1 and Scope 2 that are mandatory under the BRSR. Scope 3 is compulsory in certain European nations, whereas in India it is not, and it is a leadership indicator. It's not an essential indicator as far as disclosures are concerned. Now, while the BRSR is obviously made compulsory for the top 1,000 entities, I have worked on the complete BRSR report, and I can tell you with certainty that the BRSR is something which will be useful to every company, big or small, which is why we brought us a concept called the BRSR Lite, right? It will be useful for smaller companies, MSMEs. It will be very interesting for you to know that when we are doing the BRSR report, when we consulted many entities, we found that smaller entities were in fact having their own versions of the BRSR report in a different format. And we were very intrigued by that. And when we actually asked them as to why this was, how was this happening, they said that now it's important for international companies, like for example, big ticket MNCs, which give contracts to these companies to ensure that the supply chains are like sort of firm and they are not polluting, they are having E and S standards, right? So this was how they were actually maintaining, and they said that we will not have any problems in sort of making this reporting, which is something which was a learning curve for us, right? See, today also, if you look at the BRSR core, from where does the concept of the core come from? It's essentially not ensuring that just my house is in order. It's not just my house is clean. It does not mean that I clean my house and dump all my dust outside, right? I have to ensure that the entire supply chain is also clean, which is why. This was what was brought out by an undercover reporter from the New York Times, and this is when the concept of a supply chain ESG actually caught on. So what this person did was he went to China, he went to Bangladesh, and he undercover and he visited these factories, and these factories where Adidas and Nike's shoes were being manufactured, and they were being manufactured 7 levels below the ground, right? And 7 levels below the ground, they had small children who were actually stitching these shoes for less than $1 a day. So essentially the cost of that was maybe $1 or $2. It was being sold for hundreds of dollars, while the profit margin is not something which anyone is going to poke one's nose into. The fact is that they were being made in such conditions. So are you okay with sort of pushing some human being for your own pleasure, right? So that is from where the whole concept of a social understanding started catching up. And so now companies are very concerned about their supply chain also being following the same standards as the main company, which is why we have also mentioned that in the BRSR. Now, I'm not going to talk about things like nuclear waste and other things. This could be part of other presentations, and we also don't have much time today. But and we also need to bring some important issues as far as this particular thing is concerned on green bond framework. But I want to speak one small aspect to you on the social aspect of life. Okay. Now on the right hand side, I want you to look at this photograph. Okay, what is there in this photograph? This photograph is of a drawing, and this drawing is made by a person called Kevin Lee, an artist. And this person has made this drawing on the footsteps of the London Metro. And why has he made this drawing on the footsteps of the London Metro? So that people can actually stamp over this drawing and walk. And what is this person trying to convey through this drawing? This person is trying to convey that the poor people, and if you look at this particular drawing, it's of a very poor boy, right? These are the poor people amongst us, right? They are invisible around us. So we really don't care. So which is why when Linux came out with its operating system, they named it Ubuntu in the honor of a tribe in Africa, which ensures that things are done for the entire society rather than an individual, right? So as far as social aspects are concerned, now that is why if you look at section 166(2) of the Companies Act and the LODR, they have said that just profit maximization is not the the goal of a particular director. A director has to ensure that the business is responsible to the society and the environment and other stakeholders. So it's not just making money, making profits. That's an issue. Sustainable business, socially relevant business is something that is that is important. So what I will do is that I'm going to stop here and I'm going to go to my team, and my team is going to give you a presentation. They're going to give a presentation on the green bond framework. As I told you, it's a holistic thing that SEBI has done over the past 1 year. We have brought in reforms concerning a lot of aspects as far as ESG is concerned. And green bonds is one of those. Now, the green bonds is not just a single thing. It contains multiple facets like the blue bonds and yellow bonds, transition bonds, and also items as some important concepts as regards greenwashing. So Priyanka and Nikhil will take you through this presentation, after which we will be happy to answer questions. Nikhil and Priyanka, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So basically, where we came from, this thing comes from the stakeholders theory. If you remember earlier, the shareholder theory was very prominent, but then the stakeholder theory came in, wherein your impact of what you do also impacts someone else who is not directly impacted by it. So therefore, this stakeholders theory became very important, and it was prominent all over the world, and therefore everywhere you saw sustainable finance gaining importance. Similarly, so we brought in this framework, but then in 2017, wherein we had defined green debt securities, but there was not much traction in that space. And as you can see from the data, that hardly a very few issuances had come in. So keeping that in mind, we also we thought that we will consult with the prominent agencies around the world, and an initial response was received that there is a need to align with the green bond. What we could do is we could align with the green bond principles of the ICMA, which is also recognized by IOSCO. So we brought out a consultation paper after taking it through our advisory committee, which is HOBOSAC. And what we proposed in that consultation paper was to amplify the definition of green debt securities. Earlier, we were planning to introduce a new concept of blue bonds itself, which was not under the concept of a green bond, but would be totally a new debt security in itself. So that was thought of, and we also suggested ways to reduce compliance costs for issuers of green debt securities while not creating any perverse incentive, which may lead to greenwashing. With this consultation paper was kept open for quite some time. I think it was around 58 days that we kept it open for. Around 46 comments were received. And pursuant to those comments, we again took it to our advisory committee with the recommendations that we had. And some of these comments were also received from international agencies. So taking those comments, incorporating those comments, we brought in the new framework after consulting with our advisory committee, and which basically what we did, we aligned the green bond principles which are there of ICMA, and we redefined circular economy, and we also redefined pollution prevention and control. Whereas these renewable and sustainable energy, clean transportation, climate change adaptation were already part of our green bond definition, which was there earlier. But we also tweaked it to some extent to make it compatible with the current economic environment. So the major thing was some of the comments that recommended in respect of the blue bond was that do not make it a new category, but incorporate it under the definition of green bond itself. Because if we create new categories, it may unnecessarily lead to lot of nomenclatures, which may not result into better result, which may not give us a better result, and it would be best at this moment to have it inside the green bond definition itself. So we defined blue bonds, which basically blue bonds comprise of funds which are raised for activities in the areas of clean water, water recycling, and other areas of sustainable fishing, sustainable maritime activities, which is basically related to either water or oceans. we also defined yellow bonds under the definition of green bonds, and yellow bonds are basically related to activities which pertain to solar energy, and also the upstream and downstream activities related to it. One of the key features of this activity was earlier we had not thought of incorporating transition bonds as part of this definition. But some of the comments that we received and also as part of our advisory committee discussion was to include transition bonds under the definition of this green debt. And this was also in line with the vision that India as an emerging economy we have, and in line with our INDCs, which we had committed in COP26 also. So on transition finance, Priyanka.
Thank you. Thank you, team, for giving us the opportunity. So on the transition finance, internationally, none of the jurisdictions has included transition finance in the green debt securities framework, their green bond framework. But for us, people may have questions that transition bonds are not really green, unlike other categories that are there in the green debt securities. But for us, every country is different. We can't compare India's stand with already developed nations. So SEBI took a conscious call of including transition finance so that we can provide fundraising opportunities to the entities who want to move to a carbon-less incentive industries. For example, some companies using coal-powered electricity, but now they want to move to solar energy. So using that, for this, they can raise funds through issuing transition bonds. So while we have provided options to entities to raise funds, SEBI also ensured that investors are non-confused. So for that also, we have prescribed additional disclosure requirements for issuers who are raising transition bonds. So they have to disclose their transition plans, how they are planning to achieve what they have envisioned. And for denomination also, we have prescribed that transition bonds will be denominated as GBT, so that investors can differentiate transition bonds from other categories of green bonds. Apart from that, if there is any deviation from the transition plan, issuers are required to provide those deviations in their annual report to the stock exchanges.
Yeah. So just one more point on this. Why this denomination also becomes key is a lot of investors right now, still the investor appetite in India is still not that much for this green bonds, and we observe that a lot of this interest also comes from the foreign investors. So this denotation of GBT was a bit of thinking from that angle, that it may be key for those foreign investors in order to differentiate between this and the other eligible categories under the. So yeah, so other pursuant to this Gazette notification wherein we enhanced the definition of green bonds, which was brought in February 2023, we also brought out, we also revised the disclosure requirements which were there pertaining to this, and we also brought in the requirement of certification by an independent auditor and a certifier. And other than that, one of the key things that we brought was a disclosure of major elements of the BRSR. So right now, BRSR is mandated for top 1,000 listed entities. And BRSR has, as you all are definitely aware, that it has a lot of components containing the ESG parameters of any company. But we thought, since it is a green bond, we'll limit this disclosures only to the E part of that BRSR, which is basically the chapter 6. So we culled out the chapter 6 and we tweaked it a bit to the requirement of the green debt, which are relevant for the green debt. And we mandated that disclosure on an annual basis for the green debt issuers. Other than that, there is, we also revised the initial and continuous disclosure requirements. There was not much deviation in that. So one of the key things, one of the key comments that we also received was regarding the greenwashing. So, and even our advisory committee recommended that we should do something, some sort of disclosure or some sort of advisory to these issuers in order to avoid in order to avoid any sort of activities that may lead to greenwashing. Why this greenwashing is important? Because while you are raising this green bonds and you are using the benefit of the greenium, that as mentioned by Mr. Pramod Rao and Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan, but it is also important at the same time that you do not benefit in a wrong sense out of it. So if you are doing something, if you are showing that you are doing, if you are claiming that you are doing something green, it should be actually green. So, and it also helps the issuer. And why is it important? It also helps the issuer in its image building, and it helps the issuer in raising at a lower rate, as told, as is the concept of greening. So we brought out a guidance basically, which advised the issuer for do's and don'ts that you have to do, and basically it pertained to these 4 points, wherein we had talked about utilization of proceeds, that they have to continuously monitor and track and disclose in its entirety. For example, if you have 6 pointers, 6 data pointers that came out in this particular financial year, don't disclose 3 which are beneficial for you and skip the other 3 pointers which may not show the issuer in a right sense. So that cherry picking of data should not be done. You should not use misleading labels. You should not make untrue claims. For example, you actually did you brought out some any impact out of this activity was helped you in reducing water consumption by 5%, but you are claiming 7%. So that those kind of untrue claims should not be there, which gives a false impression to the investors. So this circular basically, this is what I was mentioning about the circular that we had on greenwashing. So this, we can take through a few examples of greenwashing, and I would request Pradeep sir to help me with this, because yeah, that is his forte.
So greenwashing is something that is, a lot of companies are commonly accused of. And I'll give you one very, very easy example that comes to my head immediately. And that is on this whole, this British Petroleum, this company that produces oil and gas. This company had a major slick in the Gulf of Mexico. And immediately after that, what this company did was, because there was a huge, it impacted marine life, it impacted the entire ocean and whatnot. And what the company did was that immediately to ensure that, to assuage feelings and to ensure that people were, they didn't go hammer and tongs over it, they changed the logo of the company into green, right? So this is a perfect example of what you call as greenwashing. So essentially, what is something and what is not is something else, and why project what is not and not what is. Now, there's a couple of examples which are there, and these are very interesting. I'll tell you why. Because today we are a nation that has brought in the concept of a green bond framework on the basis of the ICMA principles. The ICMA GB principles are principle-based ones. Okay, they are principle-based. It's a principle-based framework, whereas countries in the European Union, for example, they follow a rule-based framework. Now, in the America, where is one of the largest markets in the world, it has almost 50% of the world's stock market. In case of America, the issue is that for the past 1.5 years, America is still consulting, and they are unable to come to a consensus on what can be their green bond framework, their ESG framework. Now, the issue was they have received around 15,000 comments, and they want to give credence to all of those, and they're still working on it. Hopefully, it is expected this autumn. Now, however, that has not stopped America from taking action against greenwashing. There are 2 cases which I'm going to bring here. And one is the case of Deutsche Bank's subsidiary called DWS. Now, what did DWS do? DWS exaggerated the credentials of investments which it sold to investors, which was not green. They actually showed that it was green. They sort of extrapolated the sustainable investment credentials which were not there in the first place. And again, the issue was there was a whistleblower. Of course, whistleblowers are people who sometimes even bring out things that are not known. Of course, which other people don't know. This person came out and sort of brought this to the world's notice that the company has actually had overstated the sustainable investment criteria. Now, initially, as was the case, the board denied any wrongdoing, and then initially nothing happened. But the German regulator BaFin and the SEC, because this company was also had listed on had its listing on the SEC, they launched investigations and they found that these ESG factors were actually not taken into account in those things which it had claimed to be green. And action was taken by the regulators. A couple of other examples which we have here. One is that of Goldman Sachs, one of the big investment banking firms in the world. It had violated its own ESG policies, and for which the fine was levied by the SEC. And the other big companies like BNY Mellon also paid a penalty of $1.5 million for misstatements. Essentially, there were omissions in their statements on ESG funds. A couple of very interesting examples. The World Cup football, which got over recently, was the chief of FIFA suddenly went overboard and said it's a green cup, okay, and it was a very carbon neutral cup without measuring, without any specific tangible measurements, right? And then when he was asked to produce the sources and or probably bring out statistics, he was not able to do it, and then he was also pulled up. The other one was something which we eat every other day. People who are fans of eating burgers, you all must be knowing about Burger King's burgers. They have something called the Whopper. And the Whopper is, of course, we get in vegetarian and non-vegetarian option in India, but in US and Europe, you get it as a non-vegetarian option. And it is a very famous burger because it's normally used in a lot of parties. They brought up the marketing that the Whopper was actually made in a very sustainable way. And they were pulled up because they were unable to substantiate it again. So, and then they had to give up the claims. So essentially what we are trying to say is that it is whenever there is any avenue for investment, for making people invest, it should be, because this is something which we keep doing for even normal disclosures in any offer document. In any offer document, the Companies Act says that in case there is a misstatement, then people can even be sort of charged with imprisonment, right? So it actually goes there. As much as SEBI's ICDR and SEBI's NCS regulations also bring in, we have said that in case there are issues, then you can be pulled up. Now, in case of green, it's a lot more because you're actually falsifying things, right? It's a bigger crime, if you ask me. So while we will have not started getting into the disclosures parameters, because of course, like Nikhil rightly showed us, the amount of investments in India have not been much. We expect the traction to start. In fact, this is one of the platforms where we want the tractions to start. But nothing is the fact that disclosures should be true and fair is non-negotiable as far as the regulator is concerned. So any sin of greenwashing is going to attract penalties or maybe adjudication actions on whatnot as far as SEBI is concerned. So that is something which I think you should take home to your companies and ensure that it is not done. While we have got a laundry list of checks and balances for greenwashing not to happen, the fact is that companies are person independent, and it's you need to ensure that these checks and balances are in place, whether people are there or not, so that there is no greenwashing and people are not cheated of the money for which they had originally put, because they trust the company when they say it's a green project, right? When they put in money. That's why. So we have anything else, or should we take questions?
Should take questions.
Okay. What we will do is that, Praveenji, is that we will stop here. I think we have made a presentation. And we would like questions. I think probably we should be able to answer a lot more when we hear the questions. So we request ICICI to let us know the questions.
Thank you, Pradeep, for the detailed overview about the topics. And thanks to your both the colleagues, Nikhil and Priyanka, for a detailed overview about the topics and all that. We have certain questions, Pradeep. I'll definitely be able to ask you on these questions. My question is regarding, does the current framework cover sustainable or sustainability linked bond, which is a concept broader than the green, blue, or yellow?
Mm-hmm. No. So what's the question?
So the question says, does the current framework covers the sustainability linked bond, which is a concept broader than?
Yeah, no. So I said that's a very good question. See, while we of course use the word sustainability, very carelessly, the fact is that sustainability is actually has a very larger import, right? So sustainability means carrying on something green over a long period of time. Like, can you actually do it, right? So essentially, while sustainability linked bonds can be green, all green bonds are not sustainable bonds. So this is something which I would like to clarify, and the person is right when they have actually made this observation.
I'll take the next question. Can green bond be issued by companies in any business, or companies which are into environment related business can only issue the green bonds?
No, anyone can. So you want to answer that?
So anyone can issue the green bonds as long as the purpose or project they are selecting is falling within the definition of the green debt securities.
So I'll give you one very interesting observation here. So when the concept of ESG investing started around the world, people started investing in the FANG stocks, right? You had Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, and these were considered to be ESG stocks. So just investing in all this, people said it is ESG investing. And as compared to manufacturing industries, these companies commanded a premium. Until when people actually said that, okay, even these companies emit, right? They have servers, they have plastic waste, they have electronic waste. When you compare all that, obviously they must be polluting as much as a manufacturing company, which is when people actually got into it and said that, no, it's not possible. So like Priyanka rightly said, as long as you take, you are involved in any green project. In fact, Priyanka and Nikhil gave a presentation on transition bond. A transition bond is something which can be adopted by any company. It need not be a manufacturing company. So anything that is involved in those objects that we have sort of delineated in the definition, you can issue a green bond.
So this can be one segment of the business of the company also. This is like tobacco manufacturing company is creating hospitals for cancer cures.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't mind that. It's better than a company not doing it, right? It's better than a tobacco manufacturing company only manufacturing tobacco. But see, I'll tell you what. That's another very nice example. There's this company which Godfrey Phillips is one of the largest cigarette companies in the world, and this company actually bought an asthma drug. Okay, they bought the company that was selling the asthma drug in England, while and Carlyle was one of the biggest investors in that particular company. And while there was a hue and cry over it, the fact they did go ahead and finish the the acquisition. So today it's a company that manufactures cigarettes and also makes asthma drugs. So take it or leave it.
Right.
I still feel that it's better than manufacturing only cigarettes. That's my view.
Yes, thank you. One interesting question is, investment in green bond by corporate would qualify for the CSR?
So CSR is actually a sort of a different concept. And I believe the concept of CSR gets widened by the day, right? And it is something which in the MCA, so there is a list of purposes that is already mentioned in the CSR. Some of them may be green, some of them may not be green. Like, for example, if you're going to adopt a village, there can be a lot of parts of green to the village itself. So it can be a part of the whole thing, but just a green thing cannot be CSR. But the purposes which qualify as CSR is something which will come under the Companies Act. So it can be green. So it need not be green.
Sir, also one more thing, just an addition. CSR activities are generally carried out of the profits that a company generates. Whereas a green bond is something that you are raising money for doing some activity.
Yeah. That's a very valid point.
Different sort of.
Yeah. Chalk and cheese, actually.
Correct. My next question is, how much different these bonds would be from the zero coupon bond or zero principal bonds?
So see, zero principal, zero coupon bonds are something which SEBI brought in for the purpose of the social stock exchange. And that is something which is called as a social impact bond or a development impact bond in various parts of the world. So that is something where we sort of harnessing the contributions of NGOs. Like for NGOs, it's more about for NGO related issues. Whereas this is something completely different. It has a principal, it has interest. So it has a coupon and it has an interest. So it's not zero coupon, zero interest bond. So zero coupon, zero interest bond was specifically it is specifically contoured for the social stock exchange related projects.
Right. My next question is, does SEBI has any thought process for increasing a secondary market activity in corporate bonds? If this market is not vibrant, how one could expect a robust issue regime of green bonds?
Yeah, see, we are in fact concentrating on the primary market first, so that there should be something in the primary market for the secondary market to start, right? It's a very wonderful and fabulous question. And we really want to do it. Now, if you look at it, there are multiple things that SEBI is planning for the liquidity in the bond market. And one of the things is we brought in the concept of the RFQ mechanism, where the quotes are transparent so that many other people can also bid. And it would lead to many people, including, many instruments, including the green bonds, to be made that way. Secondly, we also have, brought in this concept of the limited purpose clearing corporation, which will help in the repo in corporate bonds. So once that particular thing, the underlying thing, there is a liquidity in the underlying thing, and we are very heartened to tell you that for the past few weeks, there has been some activity there, and it is only going to increase. And once that happens, it will lead to a transition, it will lead to a mirror effect in the secondary market, which will obviously have an impact in the primary market. But it's a very, very valid and important question. But we also hope that it will happen. And over a period of time, I'm sure that will happen. In fact, I'll also tell you something similar in case of municipal bonds to ensure that there is traction in the municipal bond thing, because most of the municipal bond projects are actually green in nature. So we even brought in a municipal bond index, right? So over a period of time, if the number of stocks are increased or more, that we will even be having a green bond index. And that is our, our next peak that we want to climb.
Thank you. I don't have much questions. One or two still questions are remaining. I'd like to touch upon the same. In case of private company, if that company is issuing green bonds, is that private company also need to follow the regulations?
See, now there is one very unique definition as far as the private company is concerned under the Companies Act. Section 252 of the Companies Act says that any company that is listed is a listed entity. However, it excludes debt listed entities issued by private limited companies and public limited companies. But SEBI has always held the view that should you choose to list, whether you're a private, because in case of equity, you cannot list a private limited company. You can list only a public limited company. Whereas in case of debt, you can list a private limited company also, and also a public limited company. Now, should you choose to list, then you will be treated on par with any other company that is listed. So whether it is public or private, if you choose to list the bond, then you will have to compete.
Okay. Any coupon rate has been identified for the bonds? What would be the tentative coupon rates?
So that is discovered by the issuer, sir.
So that is discovered by the issuer, right? Priyanka rightly says, and we in fact have a price discovery mechanism called the electronic book provider platform. In case it's more than 50 crore, it's a voluntary thing you can adopt, irrespective of the issue size. But if the issue size is 50 crore or more, you can use the electronic book provider platform to help you discover the price.
Correct.
Please.
In case the particular person who has asked this question, he wants to know what are the coupon rates of the past issuances of the green bonds, he can go and check it on our website. We have the data under the data column for the green debt security.
Yes, and just to add to what Nikhil has said, I can understand the ladder of inference. So essentially, they want to understand as to what would have a brown bond commanded at that point in time to understand the greenium concept. So one is like what Nikhil said, you can actually check the company's green bond issuances and the coupon rates that are there on the SEBI website. And today, there are so many articles and studies that have been made which sort of compare a brown bond and a green bond and the premium which it can, a green bond can command, right? Which you call as the greenium.
One interesting question is there, Pradeep. Automobile industry in manufacturing of electric vehicles can float green bond in the market. If so, are the disclosure norms differs from the normal fundraising through the corporate debentures or infra bonds or the same?
Okay, it's a very good question. But see, that is what when Nikhil and Priyanka were trying to explain what exactly is a green bond as far as India is concerned. When you take a look at the definition of the green bond, you might have observed that the definition of a green bond is principle based, right? We have not gotten into rules. And I can understand again from where this question comes from. In certain countries like the European Union, a green is something that is actually measured in terms, right? In terms of there are different measuring units for measuring what exactly is green. So in case you go above certain kilojoules or above certain kilograms or certain amount of emissions, you are actually not considered green, though you might have emitted less earlier, right? Whereas in India, we don't have that particular concept. Like Priyanka also tried to explain the concept of transition, where we just want to move towards something that is better than today, right? So we will like to ensure that The green bond framework is something that is going to help you do that. So we will not get into what exactly is the amount of measurement, the technicalities of how much is emitted, which will qualify something for being green or not. As long as it is principle based, as long as it is for clean transportation, as long as it is for sustainable water management, right? So you can actually go ahead and take green bonds. So in fact, which is why I tell you, in fact, for issuers, this is the right time for you to tap the green bond market, because we are not rule based today. There's a possibility that we may actually become rule based tomorrow, but today we are not rule based, and it is something which all the company secretaries listening to this program should take home. They should exhort their promoters and their directors to look at green bonds as an avenue for raising clean and green finance, because it is principle based in India. Because it strikes me at times as to why companies are willing to go abroad and borrow, where the regulations are sometimes even more granular and technical as green bonds are concerned. The same companies are borrowing more abroad, green bonds abroad as compared to India. In fact, now we have brought our framework on par with international regulators. We have also made it flexible to account for a principle-based regulation as opposed to a rule-based regulation, which people can use to tap.
Session is getting publicity. Pradeep, let me tell you, more than 4,000 people have joined through the systems of ICSI, and what you are seeing on the YouTube are different. And in addition to that,
yeah, thank you. It's nice to know that. Really nice.
Yeah. One question is regarding the global prevalence and the Indian standards from the SEBI. The global sustainability linked bonds are very prevalent, as the borrower is incentivized if it meets the target and penalized if it doesn't. What would be SEBI be enabling it in the existing guidelines?
Yeah, very good. So as far as penalties are concerned, Nikhil and Priyanka did mention, in case you have not met the target, or in case you have not used it for the purpose for which you have borrowed, then you will have to go back to the investors and return the money after consulting them. So this is something that is very clear. Now, as far as the other part of the question is concerned, do we have any incentives? Now, incentives are the greenium is one of the incentives that you can actually get, but there are no specific tax breaks that are given by the government. The industry can make a representation to the government. The investors can make a representation to the government. Like they can be given tax breaks for investing in green bonds, and industry can actually be given tax breaks for launching green bonds. But this is something which the industry has to represent. SEBI does not have the power to, specify tax-based incentives. But it's a very good question. We receive similar questions on municipal bonds also, because if you look at one of the largest municipal bond markets in the world, the United States, the tax market, the market is actually tax exempt, which is why their markets are the municipal bond markets are actually very vibrant. So that is, I can understand the ladder of inference for this particular question. So they can make it.
Yeah. So, but sir, if you notice the budget of this year of the government, the priority 5, which is the green growth. Under that, they have, for example, mentioned this hydrogen mission. They have this Govardhan scheme. They have a lot of 7-8 pointers, which basically they want to promote this green growth. And I think a few of the industries would fall under those categories, and they can take use of those schemes.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, actually. I just escaped my mind. The fact is that while you obviously can borrow and take advantage of the greenium, there are certain incentives with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Renewable Energy are giving. In fact, if you look at the electric vehicles, until recently, as part of the FAME, the faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles scheme, the government was giving 40,000 for every 1 lakh, for every vehicle that is sold. And in FAME 2, while the incentives have been brought down from between 15 to 26,000, you can still get incentives as for that. So you can actually go for a electric vehicle manufacturing and go for a green bond. So while you will also take the advantage of greenium, secondly, like Nikhil said, you can also take advantage of certain incentives which the government is also giving you.
Right. One more question is there. How green bond will help the companies complying with the 9 principles of National Guidelines of Responsible Business Conduct, NGRBC?
So the NGRBC is a little different. The NGRBC is actually fathomed in the BRSR. Okay. Now that is a broader concept. The broader concept means it is broader because it takes into account a lot of reporting related issues, whereas green bond is a funding related issue. Now, in case of ESG and this BRSR, it says that those 9 principles, that is, you will be ethical, you will safeguard human rights, you will take care of supply chain, you will ensure that you sell proper goods, etc. These things are contained in those 9 principles of responsible business conduct. They are largely principles for business, which companies have to take into account and which have to be reported as part of the BRSR. If you look at the BRSR, these 9 questions have been delineated into 145 odd different questions. So these questions will take care of whatever is there in the BRSR that can be taken care of even in the normal course of business. And it can range from different things, from the name of the company to whether you have specially abled people in the company, what is the diversity that you are promoting in the company, etc. So that's a larger issue. Whereas green bonds are just relating to the finance of the company.
Thank you, Pradeep. We don't have any further questions as most of them has already been answered. 1 or 2 are repeated in concern. And your presentations as well as Mr. Rao's presentation and Harini's presentation has already covered most of the things. May I request you to share your closing remarks, then we'll come for the formal vote of things.
Yeah. Firstly, I would like to thank Praveenji, Narasimhanji and ICSI for this program. As I started as we started before, when we started, we said that this program is possible only because of what ICSI managed to do. We just spoke to you just 2 weeks back, and you are happy enough to oblige. In fact, it got a little delayed because we were having a municipal bond program last week. Otherwise, we actually would have had this program last week itself. So thank you so much. The idea behind this program, as opposed to any other program which is knowledge sharing only, this is something where we want the compliance officers to go back to their companies and tell the board that please make presentations. In fact, you can do this. Generally, what happens is that under the LODR, whenever a new regulation comes, you are supposed to appraise the directors that there is something like this that is existent. The one thing which actually pricks us is that whenever we have gone and spoken to different companies, they are actually unaware of some framework like this. So that is something that is appalling. So because see, what happens is that compliance is not a one-way street. I just don't tick the box. It's not like I file different things and go ahead. There are things which will actually help you. The Green Bond Framework is one such facilitator, and companies need to take advantage of it. And like the ICICI very clearly says, and in fact stresses every time, a company secretary is not a person who is there just to file things. The person is not a secretary in the conventional sense. A company secretary is a governance professional. And when you are saying a secretary is a governance professional, it's important that the governance professional actually takes this to the board. Please make presentations to your board about the Green Bond Framework. Please let us know. We are always there. We are here to help you out. 3 of us, our email IDs are there on the website. My email ID, my number is there with almost half the industry. In case you want anything, you can always reach out to us. We'll be very happy to conduct more programs in case you want. In fact, we want to do it also along with ICICI in various other regions also. We hope to do it. In fact, at the Varanasi program that is coming up also, we have planned to do something. We are in talks with ICICI. Hopefully, if we get a slot, we will be able to make a presentation on green bonds and municipal bonds also. But we thank ICICI for this gesture. And we want company secretaries to go back home with this thought that while there is something which they have learned today, hopefully, they also need to make their management learn something. So these are the 2 cents on which I'm going to stop today.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you. It was nice talking and nice presentations we have got. Though I was also personally not aware of the topic much prior to this, it's not familiar much about prior to this presentation was there. And once I got the opportunity, I personally tried to study on the papers and documents and consultation paper issued by the SEBI and all that. And after attending this webinar, now I am much familiar with this. And though not to the extent of the Nikhil and Priyanka is there, but yes, I have.
So Nikhil and Priyanka are always here to clarify all your doubts. In fact,
Yes,
I also like to take the opportunity to say that the ICICI is coming out with an ESG special book, right? So they are coming to special, and we have contributed one article to that particular ESG special. It is on the entire green bond framework. All the reforms on green bonds, not only green bonds, we have spoken about BRSR, BRSR core, ESG related reforms. So I request the company secretaries to read that also when it comes out. So it will be useful.
Sure. So that's again a nice initiative. And it has developed interest for me also. So I would like to understand things from you detail and would like to have some more presentation on technical topic. If I got the opportunity, something I can do that.
Anytime, anytime.
And again, appreciate the way you have encouraged the colleagues Nikhil and Priyanka for coming into this presentation part.
They
And
actually
would
know
like
more
to
than me.
have-
That's why they're here.
would like to have their association also for the institute wherever they can contribute in the
Sure,
various
very much.
parts.
They'll be happy to. They'll be really happy to.
Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank you
Thanks
so
to-
much, and thanks to all the people who have come today to listen. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks to Mr. Rao also for joining this webinar and giving us this opportunity to the ICSI and to joining hands with the SEBI and giving in detailed deliberations and knowledge to the members about this very versatile, typical topic. Thanks to Harini Balaji Madam also, as always, for associating with the institute and agreeing to our request. And yes, thanks to Pradeep, always joining hands with the ICSI, very friendly person to ICSI. And most of the, it's like a physician, doctor, so most of the issues can resolve by Pradeep Ramakrishnan only. Thank you so much. Thanks
Thank you
for
so
giving
much.
opportunity to the
Thank you.
ICSI.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We conclude our